The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle as 9-year-old Princess Charlotte Catherine Elizabeth Diana Windsor adjusted her small tiara one last time. Today was different from any other royal engagement she had attended. Today, she would meet the children from St. Margaret's Hospital for terminally ill children, and something deep inside her young heart told her this encounter would change everything. Princess Charlotte had always been known for her spirited nature. Unlike her older brother Prince George, who carried himself with the measured dignity expected of a future king, Charlotte possessed a warmth that seemed to radiate from within. Her parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, had noticed this quality early on. While George would carefully consider his words before speaking, Charlotte would rush forward with genuine enthusiasm, her eyes sparkling with curiosity about the world around her. The Wales family had been preparing for this particular royal visit for weeks. The Princess of Wales had explained to Charlotte that they would be meeting children who were very sick, some of whom might not get better. Charlotte had listened intently, her young mind trying to grasp concepts that even adults struggled with. She had asked many questions. Why were the children sick? Could the doctors not help them? Would they be sad? Her mother had answered each question with patient honesty, explaining that sometimes bad things happen to good people, and that their job as royals was to bring comfort and joy wherever they could. As the royal car made its way through London's busy streets toward the hospital, Charlotte pressed her face against the window, watching the world go by. She clutched a small bag containing handmade friendship bracelets she had spent hours creating the night before. Each bracelet was unique, crafted with different colored beads and small charms. Her governess had helped her make enough for every child they would meet, plus a few extra just in case. The hospital came into view, a modern building with colorful murals painted on its exterior walls. Charlotte could see crowds of people gathering behind barriers, some holding cameras, others simply hoping for a glimpse of the royal family. She waved enthusiastically from the car window, her genuine smile causing many in the crowd to wave back with equal enthusiasm. Inside the hospital, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the head of pediatric care, was making final preparations for the royal visit. She had worked at St. Margaret's for 15 years and had seen many dignitaries come and go, but she was particularly curious about how Princess Charlotte would react to meeting the children. The young princess had developed quite a reputation for her authentic interactions during public appearances, often going off-script to engage more personally with people she met. The first child Charlotte would meet was 7-year-old Emma Thompson, who had been battling leukemia for 2 years. Emma had specifically requested to meet Princess Charlotte after seeing her on television during the coronation. Despite her illness, Emma maintained an infectious optimism that had endeared her to all the hospital staff. She had been practicing a curtsy for weeks, determined to greet the princess properly. As the royal family entered the hospital's main corridor, Charlotte walked between her parents, her posture straight but her eyes darting around, taking in every detail. The walls were covered with artwork created by the young patients, and Charlotte stopped several times to examine the drawings more closely. One particular piece caught her attention, a painting of a rainbow with the words "Hope Lives Here" written in a child's careful handwriting. The first meeting took place in the hospital's activity room, which had been decorated with balloons and banners for the occasion. Emma sat in a wheelchair near the window, wearing her best dress and a beautiful headscarf that concealed her hair loss from chemotherapy treatments. When Charlotte entered the room, Emma's face lit up with pure joy. Charlotte approached Emma with the natural ease that had become her trademark. Instead of the formal greeting everyone expected, Charlotte immediately noticed Emma's headscarf, which was decorated with small unicorns. "I love your unicorns," Charlotte said genuinely, kneeling down to Emma's level. "They're my favorite magical creatures too." Emma beamed with pride. "My mom bought it for me when I had to have my treatment," she explained, touching the scarf gently. "The unicorns make me feel brave." "I think you're already the bravest person I've ever met," Charlotte replied, and everyone in the room could see she meant every word. She reached into her small bag and pulled out one of her handmade bracelets, this one featuring purple and silver beads with a small unicorn charm. "I made this last night, and I think it was meant for you." As Charlotte fastened the bracelet around Emma's thin wrist, something remarkable happened. Emma began to cry, not from sadness, but from overwhelming happiness. The sight of this brave little girl's tears caused something to shift inside Charlotte. For the first time in her young life, she was confronting the reality that some children her age faced challenges she could barely imagine. The next child Charlotte met was 10-year-old Marcus, who had been born with a rare genetic condition that affected his mobility and speech. Marcus communicated primarily through gestures and a special tablet device. When Charlotte approached his bed, Marcus was initially shy, hiding behind his tablet. But Charlotte's genuine interest in learning about his device quickly broke the ice. "Can you teach me how this works?" Charlotte asked, sitting on the edge of his bed with permission from the nurses. Marcus's eyes widened with excitement as he began demonstrating his communication tablet. Soon, Charlotte was helping him create sentences and even managed to make him laugh by accidentally typing silly messages. Dr. Mitchell watched from across the room, amazed by Charlotte's natural ability to connect with each child on their level. Unlike many adult visitors who seemed uncomfortable or overly careful around the sick children, Charlotte treated each one as she would any friend her age. She asked genuine questions, shared her own stories, and, most importantly, she listened. As the visit continued, Charlotte met more children, each with their own unique story. There was 5-year-old Lily, who was waiting for a heart transplant, and spent her days creating elaborate fairy tales. Charlotte sat cross-legged on the floor listening to Lily's stories, completely absorbed in the magical worlds the little girl created. There was 12-year-old Ahmed, who loved football despite being confined to bed. Charlotte promised to have her father, who was president of the Football Association, send him signed jerseys from his favorite teams. With each interaction, Charlotte's understanding of the world deepened. She began to realize that being a princess meant more than wearing beautiful dresses and attending fancy events. It meant using her position to bring light into dark places and hope to those who needed it most. The most profound moment came when Charlotte met 8-year-old Sophia, who had been at the hospital for 6 months and rarely spoke to anyone. Sophia's parents had explained that their daughter had become withdrawn since beginning her treatment. When Charlotte approached Sophia's bedside, the little girl was staring out the window, seemingly lost in her own world. Charlotte didn't try to force conversation. Instead, she simply sat quietly beside Sophia's bed, following her gaze out the window. After several minutes of comfortable silence, Sophia turned to look at Charlotte. "Do you ever feel scared?" Sophia asked in a barely audible whisper. Charlotte considered the question seriously before answering. "Sometimes," she admitted, "when I have to speak in front of lots of people, or when I worry about doing the right thing." "Do you feel scared too?" Sophia nodded slowly. "I'm scared I won't get better." Charlotte reached out and gently took Sophia's hand. "I can't promise everything will be okay," she said with wisdom beyond her years. "But I can promise that you're not alone. And sometimes, when we're scared, the bravest thing we can do is just keep going one day at a time." This simple exchange between two children, one a princess, one a patient, seemed to unlock something in Sophia. She began to share her fears about her illness, her sadness about missing school and friends, and her dreams for the future. Charlotte listened intently, offering comfort not through false promises, but through genuine presence and understanding. As word of Charlotte's remarkable interactions with the children spread throughout the hospital, staff members began gathering in hallways and doorways, many wiping away tears as they witnessed the young princess's extraordinary compassion. Nurses who had worked with sick children for decades were moved by Charlotte's ability to see past the illness to the person within. The Prince and Princess of Wales watched their daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. They had always known Charlotte was special, but seeing her natural empathy in action was deeply moving. The Princess of Wales later confided to a close friend that watching Charlotte that day made her realize her daughter had been born with a gift for healing hearts, even if she couldn't heal bodies. Dr. Mitchell approached Charlotte near the end of the visit. "Your Royal Highness," she said formally, "I've been working here for 15 years, and I've never seen the children respond to anyone the way they've responded to you today." Charlotte looked up at Dr. Mitchell with serious eyes. "They're just like me," she said simply. "They want to feel important and loved. Being sick doesn't change that." As the royal visit neared its end, Charlotte made an unexpected request. She asked if she could visit the children who were too sick to come to the activity room. Against protocol, but with her parents' permission, Charlotte was allowed to walk through the wards, stopping at each room to spend a few minutes with the most critically ill children. In one room, she met baby Oliver, only 18 months old, who was surrounded by machines that helped him breathe. Charlotte stood quietly by his crib, gently humming a lullaby her own grandmother used to sing to her. Oliver's parents later said it was the most peaceful they had seen their son in weeks. In another room, she encountered 15-year-old James, who was in the final stages of bone cancer. James had specifically asked not to meet any visitors, feeling too weak and embarrassed about his appearance. But when Charlotte appeared in his doorway, something changed. Perhaps it was her youth or her genuine lack of judgment, but James found himself talking to her about his love of astronomy and his dream of becoming an astronaut. Charlotte listened to James describe the constellations and planets he studied from his hospital bed, and she promised to arrange for him to receive a telescope that would allow him to pursue his passion even from the hospital. More than that, she seemed genuinely interested in learning from him, asking questions that showed she valued his knowledge and opinions. As Charlotte prepared to leave the hospital, the children she had met gathered in the main corridor, those who were able to walk standing alongside wheelchairs and mobile hospital beds. They had organized a small surprise for her, a handmade card signed by everyone, thanking her for her visit. But it was Charlotte who surprised them. Instead of simply accepting the card and leaving, she did something unexpected. She took off her small tiara, looked at it thoughtfully for a moment, and then approached Emma, the first child she had met. "This feels too fancy for just one person," Charlotte said, placing the tiara gently on Emma's head. "I think it looks much better on you." Emma gasped, her hands flying to the tiara in disbelief. "But it's yours," she whispered. "The most beautiful things are meant to be shared," Charlotte replied. "Besides, you're the real princess here. You fight dragons every day." The room fell silent except for the sound of gentle crying from parents, staff, and even the accompanying security personnel. In that moment, Charlotte had done something unprecedented in royal protocol, but entirely in keeping with her character. She had given away a symbol of her status to honor the courage of a sick child. As the royal family's car pulled away from St. Margaret's Hospital, Charlotte was unusually quiet. Her parents respected her need to process what she had experienced, but they could see the profound impact the day had made on their daughter. She spent the journey home staring out the window, her small hand unconsciously touching the place where her tiara had been. When they arrived back at their residence, Charlotte went straight to her room. Her parents gave her space, understanding that she needed time to reflect on the day's events. Later that evening, her mother found her sitting at her desk, writing in a journal she had started keeping after learning to write properly. "What are you writing about, darling?" her mother asked gently. Charlotte looked up with eyes that seemed older than her 9 years. "I'm writing about Emma and Sophia and all the children," she said. "I want to remember their names and their stories. I want to remember how brave they are." Her mother sat on the bed, moved by her daughter's thoughtfulness. "Today meant a lot to you, didn't it?" Charlotte nodded seriously. "Mama, why do some children get sick and others don't? It doesn't seem fair." It was a question that had no easy answer, and the Princess of Wales chose her words carefully. "Life isn't always fair, my darling. But that's exactly why people like us need to use what we have to help others. You did something very special today." "I want to go back," Charlotte said firmly. "Not just once, but lots of times. Emma said she's going to be in the hospital for months, and James wants to show me his star charts when he gets his telescope." Her mother smiled, recognizing the determination in her daughter's voice. "We'll see what we can arrange," she promised. That night, as Charlotte prepared for bed, she made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. She decided that being a princess wasn't just about representing the royal family at official events. It was about using her privilege and platform to make a real difference in people's lives, especially those who were suffering or in need. The events of this day at St. Margaret's Hospital would become the foundation for Charlotte's future charitable work and her understanding of royal duty. But more than that, it marked the beginning of her transformation from a spirited young princess into someone who truly understood the weight and responsibility of her position. As she drifted off to sleep, Charlotte's last thought was of Emma wearing the tiara, and how sometimes the most royal thing you can do is recognize the royalty in others. Little did she know that this day would be remembered not just by the children she met, but by everyone who witnessed her extraordinary capacity for compassion and her instinctive understanding that true nobility comes from the heart, not from titles or crowns. The weeks following Princess Charlotte's visit to St. Margaret's Hospital brought unexpected changes to the royal household. Charlotte's request to return wasn't forgotten, and her parents found themselves fielding daily questions about when the next visit could be arranged. The young princess had developed what could only be described as a mission, and her determination to maintain connections with the children she had met was both touching and impressive. Every morning at breakfast, Charlotte would ask about her friends at the hospital. She had memorized each child's name and their specific conditions, asking detailed questions about their treatments and progress. Her governess, Miss Sarah Williams, noted that Charlotte's attention to these matters was far beyond what anyone would expect from a 9-year-old, even one raised in the royal family. The royal household staff began to notice changes in Charlotte's behavior that went beyond her interest in the sick children. She had become more conscious of waste, asking why so much food was prepared when people in the world were hungry. She questioned why she needed so many dresses when other children had so few clothes. Her parents realized that the hospital visit had awakened something profound in their daughter's social consciousness. Prince William found himself having deep conversations with Charlotte about privilege and responsibility. During one of their evening walks in the gardens of their country home, Charlotte asked him directly, "Papa, why were we born into this family when other children were born into families where they get sick and don't have money for medicine?" William paused, struck by the complexity of his daughter's question. "Sometimes life gives us advantages we didn't earn," he explained carefully. "But with those advantages comes the responsibility to help others who weren't so fortunate. Is that why we do royal visits?" Charlotte asked, her hand finding her father's as they walked. "That's exactly why," William confirmed. "Our job isn't to feel guilty about what we have, but to use it to make things better for others." This conversation seemed to crystallize something in Charlotte's understanding. The next day, she approached her mother with a proposal that surprised everyone. Charlotte wanted to start writing letters to each of the children at the hospital, and she wanted to learn more about their specific illnesses so she could understand what they were going through. The Princess of Wales was initially hesitant. She worried that her daughter might become too emotionally invested in situations that could be heartbreaking. But Charlotte's persistence and the maturity she had shown convinced her parents to support their daughter's initiative, with appropriate guidance and supervision. Dr. Mitchell at St. Margaret's Hospital was contacted about Charlotte's request to correspond with the patients. The doctor was both moved and amazed by the princess's continued interest. She explained that many of the children had been talking about Charlotte's visit constantly, and that Emma still wore the tiara during her treatments, claiming it gave her strength. The first letter Charlotte wrote was to Emma. She spent hours crafting it, asking her mother for help with spelling difficult words, but insisting on writing it entirely in her own handwriting. The letter was filled with questions about Emma's treatments, updates about Charlotte's own activities, and promises to visit again soon. Most importantly, Charlotte wrote about how thinking of Emma's bravery helped her feel brave too. When Emma received the letter, her reaction was powerful enough that the nursing staff called her parents immediately. Emma had been having a difficult week with her chemotherapy, often feeling too sick to eat or participate in activities. But Charlotte's letter seemed to energize her in a way that surprised everyone. She insisted on writing a reply immediately, despite feeling weak from her treatments. Emma's reply letter revealed a wisdom and perspective that amazed the adults around her. She wrote about how being sick had taught her to appreciate small things, like the taste of ice cream when her stomach wasn't upset, or the feeling of sunshine through the hospital window. She told Charlotte that having a princess care about her made her feel special in a way that helped her fight harder against her illness. As correspondence between Charlotte and the hospital children continued, word of the princess's ongoing commitment began to spread beyond the hospital walls. Royal reporters started investigating what they initially assumed was a simple follow-up story about a royal visit. But they discovered something much more significant. Charlotte's letters weren't perfunctory royal gestures written by staff and signed by the princess. These were genuine, heartfelt communications from a child to other children, filled with personal details, emotions, and authentic care. The children's letters back to Charlotte revealed the deep impact her continued attention was having on their spirits and their treatment outcomes. Dr. Mitchell began documenting what she observed as the Princess Charlotte effect among her patients. Children who corresponded with the princess showed improved cooperation with treatments, better emotional resilience, and, in some cases, surprising improvements in their physical responses to therapy. While she was careful not to attribute medical improvements solely to Charlotte's influence, the correlation was undeniable. Marcus, the boy with the genetic condition who communicated through his tablet device, began creating digital art specifically to share with Charlotte. His artwork, which depicted brave princesses helping other children, became more sophisticated and emotionally complex as his correspondence with Charlotte continued. The art therapy staff noted that Marcus's work showed a new sense of purpose and hope. Sophia, the withdrawn girl who had shared her fears with Charlotte, began participating more actively in hospital programs. She started a journal after Charlotte mentioned keeping one, She began writing stories about brave children who helped each other through difficult times. Her parents credited Charlotte's influence with bringing their daughter back from the emotional isolation that had worried them so deeply. Charlotte's commitment extended beyond letter writing. She began researching each child's condition, reading medical websites, and asking her parents to explain complex medical terms. Her notebooks filled with information about different cancers, genetic conditions, and treatment protocols. Her governess was amazed by Charlotte's ability to absorb and understand medical information that many adults would find challenging. This research led Charlotte to ask increasingly sophisticated questions about healthcare, medical research, and the differences in treatment availability around the world. She learned that children in other countries often couldn't access the same quality care available at St. Margaret's, and this knowledge troubled her deeply. During a family dinner conversation, Charlotte announced her intention to become a doctor when she grew up. Her parents exchanged glances, recognizing that this wasn't a passing childhood fantasy, but a serious declaration shaped by her recent experiences. "Why do you want to become a doctor, darling?" her mother asked gently. "Because doctors help children get better," Charlotte replied matter-of-factly. "And if I'm going to be a princess, I should know how to really help people, not just visit them." Prince William smiled at his daughter's logic. "Being a princess who's also a doctor would be quite unusual," he noted. "Maybe that's what we need," Charlotte responded with conviction. "Someone who understands both sides." As autumn approached, Charlotte's correspondence with the hospital children had grown into a regular routine that shaped her daily schedule. She had established specific times for writing letters, researching medical conditions, and planning future visits. Her commitment was so consistent that hospital staff began adjusting their own schedules around her letters, knowing that receiving mail from Charlotte often marked the emotional high point of a child's week. The royal household staff noticed that Charlotte's room had transformed into what could only be described as a mission control center for her charitable activities. One wall featured a map with pins marking locations of different children's hospitals around the world. Another wall displayed artwork and photos sent by her hospital friends. Her desk was organized with folders containing information about various medical conditions and research into potential treatments. Charlotte's brothers began to take notice of her dedication. Prince George, initially puzzled by his sister's intense focus on sick children, started asking questions about her activities. Charlotte explained her work with the patience of someone much older, helping George understand the importance of using their positions to help others. Prince Louis, still very young, mostly just enjoyed the colorful artwork Charlotte displayed from her hospital friends. The Princess of Wales found herself learning alongside her daughter as Charlotte's questions became increasingly complex. Charlotte wanted to know about medical research funding, why some diseases had better treatments than others, and how royal patronage could actually make a difference in medical advancement. These weren't typical concerns for a 9-year-old, but then, again, Charlotte had never been typical. As Charlotte's knowledge grew, so did her frustration with the limitations of what she could do to help. During one particularly emotional evening, she confided in her mother that learning about her friend's illnesses made her feel helpless. Emma's treatment wasn't progressing as hoped, and Sophia's parents had shared that their daughter was facing additional complications. "I want to do more than just write letters," Charlotte said, tears in her eyes. "I want to actually help them get better." Her mother held her close, understanding the weight her daughter was carrying. "Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is exactly what you're doing," she assured Charlotte. "Your letters give them hope, and hope is medicine too." "But what if hope isn't enough?" Charlotte asked, voicing the fear that kept her awake some nights. It was a question that had no easy answer, and her mother chose honesty over false comfort. "Sometimes hope isn't enough to cure illness," she admitted. "But it's always enough to make the difficult times more bearable. And sometimes it gives people the strength to fight longer and harder than they might have otherwise." This conversation marked a turning point in Charlotte's understanding of her role. She began to grasp that helping others wasn't always about fixing their problems completely, but about standing with them during their struggles and making sure they didn't face their challenges alone. Charlotte's next letter to Emma reflected this new understanding. Instead of focusing only on encouraging Emma to get better, Charlotte wrote about wanting to be Emma's friend regardless of what happened with her treatment. She shared her own struggles with feeling helpless sometimes, and she promised that her caring for Emma wasn't dependent on Emma's recovery. Emma's reply to this letter moved everyone who read it. The 7-year-old wrote about how Charlotte's friendship had taught her that being brave didn't mean not being scared, but rather being scared and doing what you needed to do anyway. She thanked Charlotte for treating her like a normal friend rather than just a sick child, and she shared her own dreams for the future, regardless of her illness. As Charlotte's 9th birthday approached, she made an unusual request for her celebration. Instead of a traditional party with entertainment and elaborate decorations, she wanted to host a virtual party that would include all her friends from the hospital. The idea required significant technical coordination, but Charlotte's parents recognized the importance of this gesture to their daughter. The virtual birthday party became a remarkable event that connected children across multiple hospital wards with Charlotte in her home. Each child had helped create decorations for their own space, and Charlotte had arranged for birthday cake to be delivered to the hospital so everyone could celebrate together. The joy and laughter shared during this virtual gathering was evident to everyone who participated. During the party, Charlotte made a speech that surprised the adults listening. She talked about how her hospital friends had taught her what real strength looked like, and how knowing them had made her want to become the best version of herself. She thanked them for allowing her to be part of their lives, and for teaching her lessons she couldn't learn anywhere else. James, the teenage astronomy enthusiast, had prepared a special presentation about constellations as his birthday gift to Charlotte. Using the telescope that had been arranged following Charlotte's promise, James took Charlotte on a virtual tour of the night sky, sharing his knowledge and passion despite his own physical limitations. The birthday celebration was covered by news outlets, but the focus wasn't on the novelty of a virtual royal birthday party. Instead, reporters were struck by Charlotte's obvious genuine relationships with these children and the mutual support they provided each other. Royal commentators noted that Charlotte was developing a model of royal engagement that was more personal and sustained than typical royal charitable activities. Following the birthday celebration, Charlotte's correspondence with the hospital expanded to include children from other hospitals who had heard about her letters and requested to be included. Charlotte, with her parents' support, began organizing her communications more systematically to ensure she could maintain meaningful relationships with a growing number of young patients. This expansion required Charlotte to develop better organizational skills and time management abilities. She created a calendar system for her letters, established specific days for different types of correspondence, and began delegating some research tasks to trusted adults who could help her gather information about various medical conditions and treatments. The Princess of Wales observed her daughter's growing administrative capabilities with amazement. Charlotte was essentially running a small charitable operation from her bedroom, maintaining detailed records of each child's situation, tracking their treatment progress, and coordinating various supportive activities. It was unprecedented for someone so young to demonstrate such organizational commitment to charitable work. As winter approached, Charlotte's network of hospital friends had grown to include children from across the United Kingdom, and even some international connections facilitated through royal diplomatic channels. Each relationship remained personal and individual, with Charlotte remembering specific details about each child's interests, family situation, and medical journey. The impact of Charlotte's work began attracting attention from medical professionals, child psychologists, and charitable organizations interested in understanding how her approach was achieving such positive results with young patients. Dr. Mitchell began documenting case studies, with appropriate permissions, to share the Princess Charlotte effect with other medical institutions. Charlotte's influence extended beyond individual children to their families as well. Parents began writing to thank Charlotte for the hope and strength her friendship provided to their children. Some shared that their children's correspondence with Charlotte had become a focal point for family activities, with siblings and parents helping compose letters and participating in projects suggested by Charlotte. One particularly moving letter came from Emma's mother, who wrote about how Charlotte's continued friendship had given their family something positive to focus on during the most difficult period of their lives. She explained that watching Emma light up while reading Charlotte's letters reminded the family that their daughter was still the same joyful, intelligent child she had always been, just temporarily battling an illness. As Charlotte's work continued to evolve and expand, it became clear that what had started as follow-up letters to a royal hospital visit had developed into something much more significant. Charlotte was pioneering a new model of royal charitable engagement, one based on sustained personal relationships rather than ceremonial appearances. The young princess was learning lessons about leadership, compassion, and service that would shape her entire understanding of her royal role. More importantly, she was discovering that true nobility came not from titles or ceremonies, but from the willingness to share in others' struggles and to use whatever privileges she possessed in service of those who needed support. The foundation being laid during these months would influence Charlotte's approach to royal duty for the rest of her life. But, in the moment, she was simply a 9-year-old girl who had found her calling in caring for others and was determined to live up to the trust her friends had placed in her. Winter brought challenges that tested Princess Charlotte's resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. The first difficult news came through Dr. Mitchell during a routine update call about the hospital children. James, the teenage astronomy enthusiast who had shared the constellations with Charlotte during her birthday party, was declining rapidly. His condition had progressed faster than anticipated, and doctors were now focusing on comfort care rather than curative treatments. Charlotte received this news during her morning lessons, and her reaction was immediate and profound. She stood silently for several minutes, processing what Dr. Mitchell had explained, then quietly excused herself to her room. Her governess, Miss Williams, found her an hour later sitting at her desk with a blank piece of paper, struggling to find words for a letter to James. "I don't know what to write," Charlotte confided, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you say to someone who might be dying?" Miss Williams sat beside Charlotte, recognizing that this moment represented a crucial point in the young princess's emotional development. "What would you want someone to say to you if you were scared and sick?" she asked gently. Charlotte considered this carefully. "I think I'd want them to tell me that I mattered, that my life had meaning, that they would remember me." She paused, then added with wisdom beyond her years, "And I'd want them to not be afraid to still be my friend." The letter Charlotte eventually wrote to James became a testament to her evolving understanding of friendship and mortality. She wrote about how his knowledge of astronomy had taught her to look up at the night sky differently, and how she planned to continue studying the stars because of his influence. She shared her own fears about losing him as a friend, but assured him that knowing him had changed her forever. Most importantly, she promised that his love of science and exploration would inspire her own learning for years to come. James's response to Charlotte's letter arrived just a week later, written in handwriting that was noticeably shakier than his previous correspondence. He thanked Charlotte for treating him like a normal teenager rather than a dying patient, and he shared his excitement about recent astronomical discoveries he had been following despite his illness. He also included a hand-drawn star chart, marking the constellations he most wanted Charlotte to remember him by. The exchange between Charlotte and James became a model for how she would handle similar situations in the future. Rather than avoiding the reality of serious illness or death, Charlotte chose to engage with it honestly while focusing on the life and personality of the person she cared about. This approach, while emotionally demanding for someone so young, proved to be exactly what her hospital friends needed most. As James's condition continued to deteriorate, Charlotte made a request that surprised even her parents. She asked to visit him in person, understanding that this might be their last opportunity to see each other. The logistics of arranging such a visit were complicated by James's weakened immune system and the need for strict infection control protocols, but Charlotte's determination and the family's influence made it possible. The visit to James took place on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in January. Charlotte had prepared extensively, working with hospital staff to understand all the precautions necessary to protect James from any potential infections. She wore the required protective equipment without complaint, focusing entirely on the opportunity to spend time with her friend. James was weaker than Charlotte had expected, but his excitement about her visit was evident immediately. He had prepared a special presentation about a newly discovered exoplanet that he thought Charlotte would find interesting. Despite his physical limitations, James's intellectual curiosity and passion for learning remained as strong as ever. Charlotte spent 3 hours with James that afternoon, discussing everything from space exploration to their shared love of science fiction books. She listened intently as James explained complex astronomical concepts, asking thoughtful questions that demonstrated her genuine interest in his expertise. Most importantly, she treated him exactly as she always had, as a knowledgeable friend whose opinions and insights she valued. During their conversation, James shared something that had been weighing on his mind. He was worried about his younger sister, who was struggling to understand his illness and had become withdrawn at school. James asked if Charlotte might consider writing to his sister, explaining that having a princess care about their family might help his sister feel less alone. Charlotte agreed immediately, and her letter to James's sister, Lucy, marked the beginning of another meaningful relationship. Lucy, who was only 6 years old, was initially overwhelmed by receiving a letter from a real princess. But Charlotte's warm, age-appropriate writing style quickly put Lucy at ease, and soon they were corresponding about school, favorite books, and the challenge of having a sick family member. The relationship with Lucy taught Charlotte about the ripple effects of serious illness within families. She began to understand that her hospital friends weren't the only ones who needed support. Their siblings, parents, and extended families were all affected by the emotional and practical challenges of dealing with serious childhood illnesses. This realization led Charlotte to expand her outreach efforts. She began writing to siblings of her hospital friends, offering them a connection to someone their own age who understood what they were going through. These relationships proved to be just as meaningful as her connections with the patients themselves, and they taught Charlotte valuable lessons about the complexity of providing emotional support. As winter progressed into spring, Charlotte's network of relationships had grown to include nearly 50 children and their families across multiple hospitals and care facilities. Her organizational system had evolved into a sophisticated operation that impressed even the royal household staff members who assisted with logistics and correspondence management. Charlotte maintained detailed files on each child and family, tracking medical updates, personal interests, family situations, and ongoing projects or conversations. She had established different types of correspondence for different needs: regular friendship letters, special occasion cards, educational materials she thought specific children would enjoy, and comfort letters for particularly difficult times. The scope of Charlotte's work began attracting attention from child welfare organizations and medical institutions beyond the United Kingdom. International children's hospitals began reaching out, asking if Charlotte's model of sustained personal engagement could be replicated or expanded to include their patients. While Charlotte's parents were careful to manage these requests appropriately, they recognized that their daughter had developed something truly innovative in terms of royal charitable work. One of the most significant developments during this period was Charlotte's decision to begin making regular unannounced visits to local hospitals and care facilities. Unlike formal royal visits with extensive preparation and media coverage, these were private, personal visits focused entirely on building relationships with children and understanding their experiences more deeply. During one of these informal visits to a different hospital, Charlotte met Maya, an 8-year-old girl who had been severely injured in a car accident and was learning to walk again with prosthetic legs. Maya was initially shy and self-conscious about her prosthetics, but Charlotte's genuine interest and complete lack of judgment quickly broke down these barriers. Charlotte spent the afternoon learning about Maya's physical therapy routine, asking detailed questions about how the prosthetics worked, and listening to Maya's dreams of becoming a dancer despite her physical challenges. When Charlotte learned that Maya had been a talented ballet student before her accident, she made arrangements for a professional dance instructor to work with Maya on adapted choreography that would accommodate her prosthetics. The connection with Maya introduced Charlotte to an entirely new area of childhood challenges, acquired disabilities, and the process of adapting to life-changing injuries. Maya's determination and positive attitude despite facing such significant physical obstacles inspired Charlotte and added another dimension to her understanding of resilience and courage. Maya's progress in dance therapy became one of Charlotte's most closely followed success stories. The young girl's improvement in both physical capabilities and emotional confidence was remarkable, and her eventual performance of an adapted ballet routine was attended by Charlotte and celebrated by the entire hospital staff. The performance was also shared with Charlotte's other hospital friends through video, creating a network of mutual support and inspiration among the children. As Charlotte's 10th birthday approached, she decided to use the occasion to create something permanent that would benefit all the children she had come to know. Working with her parents and various charitable organizations, Charlotte proposed establishing a fund specifically for purchasing equipment and resources that would improve life for hospitalized children. The Princess Charlotte Fund for Hospitalized Children was announced as part of her birthday celebration, with Charlotte herself contributing her birthday gift money as the founding donation. The fund was designed to purchase items that hospitals often couldn't afford: advanced gaming systems for teenage patients, professional art supplies for creative therapy programs, specialized communication devices for children with various disabilities, and comfort items like weighted blankets and sensory toys. Charlotte insisted on being involved in every decision about how the fund's money would be spent. She established a review process that included input from patients themselves, ensuring that purchases actually met real needs identified by the children who would benefit. This approach meant that funded items were practical, wanted, and effectively utilized rather than being purchased based on adult assumptions about what children needed. The first major purchase from Charlotte's fund was a mobile virtual reality system that could be brought to bedridden patients, allowing them to experience virtual field trips, attend concerts, or simply escape their hospital environment for brief periods. Charlotte had identified this need through conversations with patients who felt isolated from the world outside their medical treatments. Charlotte's involvement with testing and implementing the VR system taught her valuable lessons about technology's potential for improving quality of life for people with health challenges or mobility limitations. She began studying emerging technologies with applications for healthcare, adding this interest to her growing knowledge base about medical treatments and therapeutic approaches. The success of the VR system led to other innovative purchases through Charlotte's fund. The fund acquired advanced 3D printers that could create custom prosthetics and adaptive equipment for children with specific needs. It purchased professional photography equipment for programs that helped children document their medical journeys and maintain connections with family members who lived far away. It funded subscriptions to educational software that allowed hospitalized children to keep up with their schoolwork in engaging, interactive ways. Each new project undertaken by Charlotte's fund was based on direct input from the children she corresponded with regularly. This approach ensured that the fund's activities remained focused on real needs rather than becoming an abstract charitable exercise. Charlotte's insistence on maintaining this direct connection between her funding decisions and the actual experiences of hospitalized children set her fund apart from more traditional charitable organizations. As spring turned to summer, Charlotte's work had evolved into what could only be described as a comprehensive support network for hospitalized children and their families. Her daily routine included correspondence with friends across multiple continents, research into new medical treatments and assistive technologies, coordination of fund activities, and regular visits to various healthcare facilities. The emotional demands of this work were significant for someone Charlotte's age. She experienced the sadness of friends who didn't recover from their illnesses, the frustration of being unable to solve problems that were beyond any individual's power to fix, and the ongoing challenge of balancing hope with realistic understanding of serious medical situations. Charlotte's parents and support team worked carefully to ensure that her charitable activities didn't become overwhelming or emotionally unhealthy. They established regular check-ins with child psychologists who specialized in working with young people engaged in intensive volunteer activities, and they maintained clear boundaries around Charlotte's exposure to particularly tragic or complex medical situations. Despite these challenges, Charlotte's commitment to her hospital friends never wavered. She had found her calling in providing support and companionship to children facing serious health challenges, and she approached this work with a maturity and dedication that amazed everyone around her. Her understanding of her royal role had evolved far beyond traditional ceremonial duties to encompass a sophisticated understanding of how privilege could be used effectively in service of others. The relationships Charlotte had built and maintained were changing not only the lives of the children she corresponded with, but also the operations of the hospitals and care facilities where they were patients. Staff members reported improved patient morale, increased cooperation with treatments, and enhanced family coping strategies in cases where Charlotte's support network was involved. Charlotte's model of sustained, personal charitable engagement was beginning to influence how other members of the royal family approached their own charitable work. Her success in building genuine relationships with the people she sought to help, rather than simply making ceremonial appearances, was providing a template for more effective royal service that other family members were beginning to study and adapt. As her 10th birthday celebration concluded and Charlotte looked ahead to continuing her work, she had already established herself as an innovator in royal charitable activities and a genuine force for positive change in the lives of children facing serious health challenges. The foundation she had built would continue to grow and evolve, but its core principles of personal connection, sustained commitment, and genuine care had been firmly established. The summer of Princess Charlotte's 10th year brought an unexpected crisis that would test everything she had learned about resilience, friendship, and leadership. Emma, her first friend from St. Margaret's Hospital and the little girl who still wore Charlotte's tiara during treatments, had suffered a serious setback. The leukemia that doctors thought they were successfully treating had returned more aggressively than before, and Emma's medical team was now discussing experimental treatments that carried significant risks. Charlotte received this news during what should have been a relaxing family vacation at Balmoral Castle. Dr. Mitchell called personally to inform the family, knowing that Charlotte would want to understand Emma's situation fully rather than receiving a simplified version of events. The conversation took place in the castle's library, with Charlotte's parents present to provide support as needed. Emma's leukemia has changed, Dr. Mitchell explained carefully. It's become resistant to the treatments that were working before. We're now looking at some newer, experimental options that might help, but they're more intensive and carry more risks than what Emma has experienced so far. Charlotte listened intently, asking specific questions about the experimental treatments, their success rates, and what Emma's experience would be like. Her questions demonstrated the sophisticated medical knowledge she had acquired over the past year, but also revealed her deep concern for her friend's well-being. What does Emma think about all this? Charlotte asked, getting to the heart of what mattered most to her. She's scared, but she's also determined, Dr. Mitchell replied. She specifically asked me to tell you that she's going to fight this like the princess you taught her to be. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment after ending the call. Her parents watched as their daughter processed this difficult information, recognizing that Charlotte was facing one of the hardest aspects of caring deeply for others, the possibility of loss despite everyone's best efforts. That evening, Charlotte sat down to write what would become one of the most important letters of her young life. She wrote to Emma about courage, friendship, and the ways that love persists even when circumstances become frightening. She shared her own fears about Emma's situation while also expressing complete confidence in Emma's strength and spirit. Most importantly, she promised that her friendship with Emma wasn't dependent on any particular medical outcome. Dear Emma, Charlotte wrote, I know you're facing something really scary right now, and I wish I could take all the fear away from you. But since I can't do that, I want you to know that I'm going to be scared with you, and brave with you, and hopeful with you. Whatever happens, you will always be my first and most important friend, and you will always be a real princess to me. Emma's response to Charlotte's letter arrived just days later, and it revealed the profound impact that their friendship had made on the young patient's perspective. Emma wrote about how Charlotte had taught her that being brave didn't mean never being scared, but rather deciding to keep going even when you were afraid. She described how wearing Charlotte's tiara during treatments made her feel connected to something bigger than her illness, and how their correspondence had given her a sense of purpose beyond just surviving her medical care. I want to get better so I can keep being your friend and help other sick kids the way you helped me, Emma wrote. Even if the new treatments are hard, I know I can do it because I learned how to be strong from you. Reading Emma's letter reinforced Charlotte's understanding that her friendships with hospitalized children were genuinely mutual relationships rather than one-sided charitable activities. Emma was giving Charlotte lessons in courage and determination that were just as valuable as any support Charlotte provided to Emma. As Emma began her experimental treatment protocol, Charlotte coordinated an extensive support campaign involving all of her hospital friends. Children from multiple hospitals and countries began sending Emma cards, artwork, and encouragement videos. Charlotte organized a virtual support network that allowed Emma to receive daily messages of encouragement from dozens of other young patients who understood exactly what she was experiencing. The technological coordination required for this support network pushed Charlotte to develop new organizational and communication skills. She learned to use various video conferencing platforms, coordinate across different time zones, and manage group communications that included children with different capabilities and access to technology. Her governess and parents were amazed by Charlotte's ability to master these technical challenges while maintaining the personal touch that made each connection meaningful. One of the most innovative aspects of Emma's support network was a shared digital scrapbook that Charlotte created to document Emma's journey through experimental treatment. Children from around the world contributed photos, stories, artwork, and words of encouragement that were compiled into a continuously updated online book that Emma could access whenever she needed inspiration or comfort. The scrapbook became a powerful testament to the connections Charlotte had built among hospitalized children globally. Kids who had never met in person were supporting each other through shared experiences of illness, treatment, and recovery. Charlotte had essentially created an international peer support network that operated independently of traditional medical or social services. As Emma's treatment progressed, Charlotte made regular trips to London specifically to visit her friend in person. These visits required careful coordination with hospital schedules and infection control protocols, but Charlotte's parents supported her determination to maintain physical presence in addition to digital communication. They recognized that these visits were as important for Charlotte's emotional development as they were for Emma's support. During one particularly meaningful visit, Emma was experiencing severe side effects from her experimental medications that left her weak and discouraged. Charlotte arrived to find Emma in bed, unable to participate in many of their usual activities. Instead of trying to cheer Emma up or distract her from feeling unwell, Charlotte simply sat beside the bed and shared Emma's quiet mood. "I don't feel like fighting today," Emma confided during this visit. "I'm tired of being brave all the time." Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe being brave sometimes means letting yourself feel tired and sad," she suggested. "Maybe you don't have to fight every single day. Maybe some days you can just rest and let other people take care of the fighting for a while." This conversation marked an important evolution in Charlotte's understanding of how to support people through difficult experiences. She was learning that sometimes the most helpful thing wasn't encouragement to stay positive, but rather permission to acknowledge when things were genuinely hard and exhausting. Emma's response to Charlotte's words was immediate relief. She had been feeling guilty about not maintaining constant optimism and determination, thinking that discouragement meant she was letting down all the people who were supporting her. Charlotte's permission to have difficult days without judgment allowed Emma to be more honest about her experience and ultimately to access better emotional support. This interaction influenced how Charlotte approached all of her relationships with hospitalized children going forward. She began explicitly telling her friends that they didn't need to perform happiness or bravery for her benefit, and that she valued their honesty about difficult emotions just as much as their demonstrations of courage and hope. As autumn approached, Emma's experimental treatment began showing positive results. Her latest tests indicated that the new medications were successfully targeting the resistant cancer cells, and her medical team was cautiously optimistic about her prognosis. The news brought tremendous relief not only to Emma and her family, but to Charlotte and the entire network of children who had been following Emma's progress. Charlotte's reaction to Emma's improved prognosis was characteristically thoughtful. While she was deeply relieved and happy about her friend's medical progress, she also used the occasion to reflect on what she had learned during the period of uncertainty and fear. She wrote in her journal about how caring for Emma during the crisis had taught her that love and friendship were most meaningful when they persisted through the most difficult times. The success of Emma's treatment also provided Charlotte with new insights into the importance of medical research and experimental treatments. She began studying how new therapies were developed and tested, and she started thinking about how her charitable work might eventually extend to supporting research initiatives that could benefit future patients. Charlotte's fund made its first research-related contribution that autumn, purchasing specialized laboratory equipment for a children's hospital that was conducting studies on pediatric cancer treatments. Charlotte insisted on visiting the research facility to understand how the equipment would be used and to meet the scientists whose work might benefit children like Emma. The visit to the research laboratory was eye-opening for Charlotte in ways that expanded her understanding of how medical progress happened. She met researchers who had dedicated their careers to developing better treatments for childhood illnesses, and she learned about the long, complex process of moving from laboratory discoveries to actual treatments that could help patients. Dr. Rebecca Chun, one of the lead researchers at the facility, was impressed by Charlotte's sophisticated questions about their work. "Your Highness asks better questions than some of the medical students who visit," she noted after Charlotte's tour. "Have you considered that you might want to pursue scientific research as well as clinical medicine?" This suggestion opened up new possibilities in Charlotte's thinking about her future. She had been focused on becoming a doctor to directly treat patients, but the idea of contributing to research that could help many more children over time was appealing. She began studying both clinical medicine and research science, expanding her already impressive knowledge base to include laboratory techniques and experimental design. Charlotte's evolving interest in medical research led to new types of correspondence with her hospital friends. She began sharing simplified explanations of current research studies, helping children understand how the treatments they were receiving had been developed and what scientists were working on for the future. This educational component of her letters was enthusiastically received by children who appreciated understanding more about their own medical care. Maya, Charlotte's friend with prosthetic legs who had returned to dance, became particularly interested in research related to prosthetic technology and rehabilitation techniques. Charlotte arranged for Maya to correspond with engineers who designed adaptive equipment, creating another educational connection that enriched Maya's understanding of her own situation while inspiring her interest in potentially contributing to prosthetic design in the future. As winter returned, Charlotte's network had grown to include not only hospitalized children and their families, but also medical professionals, researchers, and technology developers who were working to improve pediatric healthcare. She was becoming a bridge between different communities that shared common goals, but didn't always communicate effectively with each other. The complexity of Charlotte's charitable work was now requiring significant administrative support from royal household staff. But Charlotte remained personally involved in every major decision and maintained direct relationships with each child in her network. She had developed systems for ensuring that her work remained personal and relationship-focused even as it expanded in scope and sophistication. One of Charlotte's most important innovations during this period was the creation of mentorship connections between children who were further along in their treatment or recovery journeys and newly diagnosed patients who were just beginning their medical experiences. Charlotte recognized that peer support from someone who had successfully navigated similar challenges could be uniquely valuable. Emma, now doing well in her recovery, became one of Charlotte's first peer mentors, corresponding with newly diagnosed leukemia patients and sharing practical advice about managing treatment side effects, maintaining hope during difficult periods, and finding ways to continue normal childhood activities despite medical limitations. Emma's letters to new patients combined medical insights with emotional support in ways that complemented professional medical care. The peer mentorship program expanded rapidly as other children in Charlotte's network volunteered to support newcomers facing similar diagnoses or treatment experiences. Charlotte coordinated these connections carefully, ensuring appropriate matches and providing guidance to her young mentors about how to be helpful without overwhelming newly diagnosed children or their families. By her 10th birthday, Charlotte had essentially created a comprehensive support ecosystem for pediatric patients that included direct friendship and correspondence, family support, educational resources, recreational activities, technological enhancements to hospital environments, research funding, and peer mentorship programs. The scope of her work was unprecedented for someone her age and was beginning to attract international attention from healthcare organizations and child welfare advocates. Charlotte's success in developing such an extensive and effective charitable operation while maintaining the personal relationships that had inspired it demonstrated leadership capabilities that impressed even experienced royal advisors and charitable organization executives. She was proving that innovative approaches to royal service could achieve results that traditional ceremonial activities rarely accomplished. As she looked ahead to another year of expanding her work, Charlotte had established herself not just as a compassionate young person who cared about sick children, but as an effective organizer, advocate, and leader who was making measurable differences in the lives of hundreds of families facing serious medical challenges. The foundation she had built was solid enough to support continued growth while flexible enough to adapt to new needs and opportunities as they arose. The moment that would forever change how the world saw Princess Charlotte came unexpectedly on a crisp October morning, during what was supposed to be a routine state visit to a children's rehabilitation center in Manchester. Charlotte, now 11 years old, had been invited to attend alongside her parents for what royal planners envisioned as a standard ceremonial appearance with photo opportunities and brief interactions with young patients. Charlotte had different ideas entirely. Having spent 2 years building deep relationships with hospitalized children across the country, she arrived at the rehabilitation center with a comprehensive understanding of the challenges faced by young people recovering from serious injuries and illnesses. She had corresponded with several patients at this particular facility and had specific plans for her visit that went far beyond the official schedule. The first sign that this visit would be different came when Charlotte's car arrived at the center. Instead of the typical formal entrance through the main lobby, Charlotte asked to be taken to the therapeutic garden where she knew several of her correspondents would be participating in outdoor physical therapy sessions. Her request surprised the security detail and facility administrators, but her parents supported their daughter's preference for beginning the visit with her established friends rather than formal introductions. In the therapeutic garden, Charlotte immediately sought out Alex, a 12-year-old boy who had been paralyzed in a diving accident 6 months earlier and was learning to navigate life in a wheelchair. Alex and Charlotte had been corresponding for several weeks, with Charlotte asking detailed questions about his rehabilitation process and sharing information about adaptive sports programs she had researched specifically for him. When Charlotte approached Alex's physical therapy session, something remarkable happened that no one had anticipated. Alex, who had been struggling with depression and resistance to his therapy routines, immediately brightened and began demonstrating the exercises he had been reluctant to attempt for his therapists. Charlotte's presence transformed his attitude toward his rehabilitation in a way that amazed the professional staff observing the interaction. "Your Highness, I've been practicing the wheelchair basketball moves you sent me videos about," Alex said excitedly, demonstrating techniques he had learned. "Watch this." Charlotte watched intently as Alex performed complex wheelchair maneuvers he had mastered specifically to show her. Her genuine enthusiasm for his progress and her knowledgeable questions about the techniques involved made it clear that this wasn't a superficial royal interaction, but a continuation of an ongoing friendship based on shared interests and mutual respect. Dr. James Morrison, the center's director of rehabilitation services, watched this exchange with growing amazement. Alex had been one of their most challenging patients, often refusing to engage with therapy exercises and expressing hopelessness about his future. Yet here he was, enthusiastically demonstrating skills he had acquired independently, motivated entirely by his relationship with Princess Charlotte. The interaction with Alex set the tone for Charlotte's entire visit. Rather than moving through a predetermined schedule of brief encounters, Charlotte spent substantial time with each patient she met, engaging in detailed conversations about their specific rehabilitation goals, their interests beyond their medical situations, and their plans for the future. When Charlotte met Sophie, a 9-year-old girl relearning to walk after a brain tumor surgery, she didn't offer generic encouragement. Instead, she discussed specific aspects of Sophie's physical therapy routine, shared stories from other young patients who had faced similar challenges, and provided practical suggestions based on techniques she had researched. Charlotte's knowledge about rehabilitation processes was sophisticated enough that she could engage meaningfully with Sophie's professional therapists about adaptive strategies and motivational approaches. The most profound moment of the visit came when Charlotte encountered Liam, an 8-year-old boy who had suffered severe burns in a house fire and was receiving treatment for both physical and emotional trauma. Liam had been avoiding group activities and was resistant to most social interactions, but something about Charlotte's approach immediately put him at ease. Charlotte sat beside Liam without attempting to force conversation, respecting his need for space, while making it clear that she was genuinely interested in spending time with him. When Liam eventually began talking, he shared fears about his appearance and concerns that other children would be afraid of him because of his scars. Charlotte listened carefully to Liam's concerns, then shared something unexpected. She told him about her own fears and insecurities, making it clear that everyone, even princesses, struggled with worries about how others perceived them. More importantly, she introduced Liam to the concept of her network of friends from various hospitals, explaining how children who looked different or faced unusual challenges had found ways to build confidence and form meaningful relationships. "Some of my best friends have scars, or use wheelchairs, or look different from other kids," Charlotte explained to Liam. "What makes them special isn't how they look, but how brave and kind and interesting they are. I think you're going to fit right in with them." Charlotte's offer to include Liam in her correspondence network was the first time in weeks that he had expressed interest in connecting with anyone outside his immediate family. The transformation in his demeanor was immediately noticeable to the staff members who had been struggling to help him engage with his recovery process. As Charlotte continued through the rehabilitation center, her interactions with patients began attracting attention from staff members, visiting families, and even other patients who weren't part of the official visit schedule. Word spread quickly through the facility that Princess Charlotte wasn't conducting a typical royal appearance, but was instead demonstrating an unprecedented level of personal knowledge about rehabilitation medicine and genuine care for individual patients. Dr. Morrison made a decision that broke protocol, but felt entirely appropriate given what he was witnessing. He invited Charlotte to observe some of the center's most innovative therapy programs, including virtual reality systems that help patients relearn motor skills, and adaptive technology workshops where young people learned to modify equipment for their specific needs. Charlotte's response to these programs exceeded everyone's expectations. She asked sophisticated questions about the technology, suggested improvements based on equipment she had seen at other facilities, and immediately identified ways that her charitable fund could support expanding these programs. Her knowledge about adaptive technology and rehabilitation techniques was comprehensive enough that she could engage as an informed collaborator rather than simply a curious visitor. The virtual reality therapy session provided one of the visit's most memorable moments. Charlotte tried the VR equipment herself, experiencing simulated environments designed to help patients practice mobility skills in safe, encouraging settings. Her enthusiasm for the technology was infectious, and several patients who had been reluctant to try VR therapy began expressing interest in participating. But it was during the adaptive technology workshop that Charlotte's true impact became most apparent. She worked alongside patients who were learning to modify gaming controllers, computer interfaces, and communication devices to accommodate their specific physical limitations. Charlotte's suggestions, based on adaptations she had seen other children develop, proved to be practical and immediately useful. Watching an 11-year-old princess troubleshoot assistive technology with the expertise of a trained rehabilitation specialist was surreal for everyone present. Charlotte's knowledge came not from textbooks or formal training, but from hundreds of hours of correspondence and research motivated by her genuine relationships with young people facing these exact challenges. The visit reached its emotional climax when Charlotte was introduced to the center's group therapy session, where young patients discussed their experiences and supported each other through the emotional aspects of recovery from serious injuries or illnesses. Charlotte had asked specifically to participate in this session, understanding that the psychological components of rehabilitation were just as important as the physical aspects. During the group session, Charlotte made a choice that shocked everyone present, including her parents and security detail. When the therapist asked each participant to share something they were struggling with, Charlotte spoke honestly about the emotional challenges of caring deeply for friends who faced serious health problems. "Sometimes I feel scared that I can't help enough," Charlotte admitted to the group. "I have friends in hospitals all over the world, and when they're having bad days or their treatments aren't working, I wish I could do more than just write letters. Sometimes I feel helpless, and I have to remind myself that being there for someone is important even when you can't fix their problems." The vulnerability Charlotte displayed in sharing her own emotional challenges with rehabilitation patients created an atmosphere of authentic connection that surprised the professional therapists leading the session. Her willingness to acknowledge her own limitations and fears made her seem more human and relatable to young people who often felt isolated by their medical experiences. The group session became a genuine support meeting where patients shared more openly than they typically did, inspired by Charlotte's example of honest emotional expression. Several young people who had been reluctant to participate in group therapy began engaging actively, finding strength in Charlotte's demonstration that even someone with significant privilege and resources struggled with feelings of helplessness when caring for others. As the official visit concluded, Charlotte made an unprecedented request. She asked if she could return to the rehabilitation center regularly, not for formal royal visits, but as an ongoing volunteer who could support patients through their recovery processes. Royal family members didn't typically volunteer at healthcare facilities in ongoing capacities, and the security and protocol implications were complex. However, Charlotte's demonstrated expertise and the positive impact of her visit made her proposal compelling from a purely therapeutic standpoint. The negotiations that followed Charlotte's volunteer proposal involved royal household staff, facility administrators, security personnel, and healthcare officials. The unprecedented nature of Charlotte's request required careful consideration of privacy issues, security requirements, and the potential impact on other patients and families who might be affected by regular royal presence. Ultimately, Charlotte's parents supported her proposal, recognizing that their daughter's passion for this work and her proven effectiveness in supporting young patients justified the logistical complications involved. The rehabilitation center agreed to a trial arrangement that would allow Charlotte to spend one afternoon per month working directly with patients under professional supervision. The announcement of Charlotte's volunteer arrangement was carefully managed by royal communications staff, but news of her commitment to regular volunteer work at the rehabilitation center inevitably reached the media. Public reaction was overwhelmingly positive, with many observers noting that Charlotte was pioneering a new model of royal service that emphasized sustained personal involvement rather than ceremonial appearances. The first media reports about Charlotte's volunteer work focused on the novelty of a young royal family member taking such an active role in healthcare support. However, as reporters investigated more deeply, they discovered the extensive network Charlotte had built over the previous 2 years and the sophisticated charitable operation she had developed to support hospitalized children worldwide. The revelation of Charlotte's comprehensive charitable work surprised even royal watchers who thought they understood the scope of her activities. The discovery that she had been maintaining personal correspondence with hundreds of hospitalized children, coordinating international support networks, funding innovative medical equipment, and facilitating peer mentorship programs painted a picture of charitable engagement that was unprecedented for someone her age. As details of Charlotte's work became public knowledge, the young princess found herself receiving recognition from medical organizations, children's charities, and international health advocacy groups. The World Health Organization invited her to speak at a conference on pediatric care, and several universities offered to provide formal training in rehabilitation medicine to support her volunteer activities. Charlotte's response to this recognition was characteristically focused on her friends rather than her own achievements. She used interviews and public appearances to highlight the stories of specific children in her network, sharing their accomplishments and advocating for improved support for families dealing with childhood illnesses and disabilities. The public attention also brought new opportunities for Charlotte's charitable fund. Corporate sponsors began offering significant donations. Medical equipment manufacturers proposed partnerships to develop child-friendly adaptive technologies, and other royal family members from different countries expressed interest in collaborating on similar initiatives. As Charlotte's 11th birthday approached, she reflected on how far her work had evolved since that first visit to St. Margaret's Hospital. What had begun as simple follow-up letters had grown into a comprehensive support network that was influencing pediatric healthcare practices and rehabilitation approaches across multiple countries. The transformation in Charlotte's own understanding of her royal role was equally significant. She had moved from thinking of herself primarily as someone who represented the royal family at public events to seeing herself as someone who could use her position and resources to create meaningful change in people's lives. Her work had given her a sense of purpose and direction that would shape her approach to royal duties throughout her life. More importantly, Charlotte had learned that true leadership often meant working alongside people rather than above them, and that the most effective charitable work came from genuine relationships and sustained commitment rather than brief, highly publicized gestures. These lessons would influence not only her future charitable activities, but also her entire approach to public service and royal responsibility. As she prepared for another year of expanding her network and deepening her relationships with young patients worldwide, Charlotte had established herself as an innovator in royal charitable work and a genuine force for positive change in pediatric healthcare. The foundation she had built was strong enough to support continued growth while remaining true to the personal connections and authentic care that had inspired it from the beginning. The 11-year-old princess who had once given away her tiara to comfort a sick child had become a young leader whose work was changing how people thought about royal service, charitable engagement, and the power of sustained personal commitment to helping others. Her story was still just beginning, but its impact was already being felt by hundreds of families and healthcare professionals around the world.